The air in the motor pool hung thick with the smell of diesel, grease, and old pride. For Sergeant Anya Vance, it was a familiar scent, a second skin. At 28, with shoulders set and eyes that had seen more than their years, she was a quiet force. But here, in the heart of the U.S. Army's tank division at Fort Sterling, she was just an annoyance. Her team, a group of young, cocky men led by Lieutenant Mark Mason, saw her as an errand runner, a glorified mechanic with a clipboard. They called her Little Sparrow, a nickname meant to sound cute but delivered with a cutting edge, a reminder that she was not one of them. Their pride and joy, the M1 Abrams tank, was a beast of steel and fire, a modern marvel. Mason treated it like his own personal kingdom, and everyone on his crew, from Corporal Jones to Specialist Ramirez, bowed to his every word. They were the tigers of the motor pool, a unit with a reputation for speed and a swagger that rubbed everyone the wrong way. Mason, with his perfectly slicked hair and a smirk that never left his face, believed that tank warfare was a man's game, a world of brute strength and instinct. He believed that women, like Anya, were meant for logistics, not for commanding 100 tons of steel. "Vance, you done with the supply run yet?" Mason called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. He was leaning against the Abrams, a rag in his hand he wasn't even using. "We got a big inspection coming up." "Don't want you messing up our record." Anya gripped her clipboard, her knuckles white. She had just spent the last 2 hours tracking down a critical fuel line part they had misplaced. "It's here, Lieutenant," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of frustration inside. "We're good to go." "Good. Now go get some coffee," he said with a wave of his hand, a dismissive gesture that stung more than any insult. "We've got the important stuff to handle." The important stuff, as he called it, was the upcoming live-fire exercise. It was the biggest event of the year, a chance for the best crews to show off their skills, and for Mason's crew to cement their place at the top. The rules were simple. Hit the targets faster and more accurately than anyone else. But Anya knew their weaknesses. Mason relied too much on raw speed and instinct. He didn't check the numbers, the small details, the things that could make or break a mission. Anya, with her sharp mind and an almost obsessive attention to detail, saw every flaw. She had a solution, a new way to calculate the windage and the distance. But every time she brought it up, she was told to know her place. One afternoon, seeking refuge from the motor pool's constant noise and Mason's insults, Anya found herself in an old, forgotten corner of the base. Tucked away in a dusty garage was a relic from another time, an M26 Pershing tank. It was an old machine, a museum piece, with a single massive 90mm gun barrel pointed at the ceiling. The paint was peeling, and a thick layer of dust covered every surface. For Anya, it wasn't just a hunk of metal. It was a ghost, a whisper of a time when the rules were different, when a new kind of power was needed to change the face of battle. She ran her hand over the cold steel of the gun barrel, feeling a strange connection. This was the tank that had gone up against the mighty German Tigers in the war. The Tigers were big, powerful, and seemed unbeatable, just like Mason's crew. But the Pershing's 90mm gun had changed everything. It was faster, more precise, a surgical tool against a blunt instrument. It was a weapon of thought, not just brute force. Anya felt a spark. This was her gun. This was her new way. It wasn't about the size of the tank or the loudness of the crew. It was about the heart of the machine, the gun, and the mind that controlled it. It was about finding a new angle, a new way to prove her worth. The morning of the live-fire exercise dawned clear and bright, but the tension in the air was as thick as a winter fog. The roar of engines, the metallic clang of hatches, and the sharp commands of sergeants filled the training grounds. This was the big day, the moment Mason's crew, the Tigers, would prove their superiority. They had been bragging for weeks. The trophy was a huge bronze cup that sat in the commander's office, a symbol of dominance. Anya was on the sidelines, her stomach in knots. She was given the job of spotting, watching for enemy vehicles and reporting back. It was a good job, a job for someone with a sharp eye, but she knew it was a way of keeping her out of the way. She watched Mason's Abrams roll onto the firing range, a steel beast with the number 207 painted on its side. Mason was in the commander's hatch, his helmet tilted just so, a king on his throne. The first part of the exercise was simple. They had to hit a series of stationary targets at varying distances. The roar of the 120mm main gun was deafening, the shockwave rippling through the air. Mason's crew hit the first 3 targets with impressive speed. The other crews, including the crew of Tank 411 led by Captain Jenkins, were playing it safe, taking their time. Mason, however, was pushing the limits, going for speed over precision, his favorite kind of game. As the exercise went on, Anya's heart sank. She noticed something. Mason's gunner was rushing his shots. He wasn't taking the time to let the computer adjust for the wind. He was guessing, relying on the tank's impressive tech to correct his mistakes. Anya had warned him about this during practice. "The computer is a tool, not a crutch," she had said. "You have to know the numbers yourself." He had just laughed her off. Suddenly, a new target appeared. It was a long shot, a moving enemy vehicle far across the plain. This was the kind of target that separated the good from the great. Mason's gunner, flustered, fired too soon. The round sailed harmlessly into the dirt, kicking up a plume of dust hundreds of yards away. Mason yelled, a sound Anya could hear even from her spot. He told his gunner to try again, but the gunner was already panicked. The second shot was a complete miss. The entire range went silent. Mason, red-faced, climbed out of the hatch. "What the heck happened?" he roared, pacing back and forth. "The gun's broken! The computer's off!" Anya, clutching her clipboard, felt a cold dread settle over her. She knew what was coming. Sure enough, Mason looked over at her, his eyes narrowing. He strode over, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Vance, you were on supply duty this week, right?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You mess with anything on the tank?" "Anything at all?" "No, Lieutenant," Anya said, her voice shaking slightly. "I just brought the part you requested." "Liar," he snarled, his face close to hers. "You did something to the systems, didn't you? You didn't want us to win. You sabotaged us!" The accusation hung in the air like a foul cloud. Anya's mind raced. He was blaming her for his own mistakes. He was blaming her for the failure of his gunner, a failure he had caused with his own reckless style. The other soldiers were watching, and she saw the doubt and suspicion on their faces. They wanted to believe Mason. They wanted a reason for the Tiger Crew's unexpected failure. A general, a stern-faced man with a silver streak in his hair, walked over, his face unreadable. He listened to Mason's furious claims. He looked at Anya, then back at Mason. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were filled with disappointment. The next day, Anya was officially removed from Mason's crew. She was given a new, menial job, one that kept her far from any tank, any gun. Her reputation was in tatters. She had a choice, to give up, to let them win, or to prove them all wrong. The injustice was a wound that refused to heal. Anya felt it every morning as she walked to her new job, a lonely path far from the roar of the motor pool. Her days were spent cleaning and organizing old storage sheds, a task designed to keep her busy and out of sight. The work was mindless, a complete waste of her skills, and she felt the weight of it every single day. She had been publicly disgraced, her honor taken from her. Mason's crew, meanwhile, was training harder than ever, trying to recover their pride and prepare for the next big event. The Commander's Cup, a massive, week-long series of tests. Anya knew she couldn't just quit. That would prove them right. It would mean they had won. But she also knew she couldn't just stay quiet. She had to fight back. Her mind, so used to solving complex problems, now focused on a single, impossible one. How to prove her worth when no one would listen. One afternoon, while sorting through a shed of old equipment, she found something unexpected. A small, dusty box with a name on it. Major James Turner. She remembered the name from her history classes. Turner was a tank commander from the old days, a veteran of the war who had fought with the Pershing tanks. He was a local legend, a hero. The box contained his old logbooks, his notes on tactics, and his theories on how to use the 90mm gun. She began to read, her heart pounding with a strange excitement. The pages were filled with careful handwriting and simple diagrams. Turner wasn't about brute force. He was about precision, about knowing your target, and about finding the exact right way to hit it. He wrote about the Pershing's 90-millimeter gun and how it was a different kind of weapon, one that didn't just smash things but destroyed them with surgical accuracy. He wrote about the German Tigers, how they were big and intimidating, but how their size made them slow and easy to target for a fast, clever crew. Anya realized she had been thinking about it all wrong. Mason and his crew were the German Tigers, big, loud, and full of themselves. They were unbeatable in a head-on fight. Her approach, her way of seeing the world, was like the Pershing's gun, quick, precise, and unexpected. She began to work on her own time. After a long day of cleaning, she would sneak over to the forgotten garage where the old Pershing tank sat. She'd bring a small flashlight and a notebook. She studied the tank, the gun, the way it all fit together. She started to apply her own math, her own theories, to the old tank. She wasn't allowed to touch the real Abrams tanks, but no one had said anything about the museum piece. Her mentor appeared one night, a tall, thin old man with a kind face and a limp. It was Major Turner himself, now a civilian who worked as a consultant for the base. He had seen her from afar, a quiet girl in the dusty garage. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Sergeant Vance," he said, his voice raspy. "Most kids these days just want to play video games. You're studying history." Anya, surprised and a little embarrassed, told him her story. She didn't hold back, telling him about Mason, about the injustice, about her new job. Turner listened without saying a word. When she was done, he just nodded slowly. "The Pershing's 90-millimeter gun wasn't the biggest or the baddest," he said, looking at the tank. "But it was a smart weapon. It was a thinking man's gun. You've got to be smart to use it right. You've got to know when to strike, and how." From that night on, Turner became her secret teacher. He gave her more old logbooks, more notes, and spent hours with her, talking about the old days. He helped her understand the principles of the gun, and together they worked on a new way to solve old problems. She was sacrificing her sleep, her free time, and every bit of her energy. But she wasn't just working for herself anymore. She was working for justice. The week of the Commander's Cup arrived. The base buzzed with energy. TV news cameras were there, ready to broadcast the events to the world. A general from Washington, D.C., a famous man named General Roberts, was in town to watch the best crews compete. Mason's team, the Tigers, was the favorite. They had been practicing hard, but their old habits, speed over precision, were still in place. Mason was louder and more arrogant than ever. Anya watched it all from the sidelines, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. Her new job kept her busy, but she was never far from the action. Her training with Major Turner was a secret, a quiet hope that kept her going. She had to find a way to show everyone what she had learned. The final challenge was the most difficult of all. A complex course with multiple moving targets, some hidden, some in bad weather conditions. The crews had to work together, communicate, and hit every single target in a specific order. The pressure was immense. Mason's team was up first. Anya watched them go, her heart pounding. They started strong, hitting the first few targets with a furious speed that impressed everyone. But she could see the flaws. Mason was pushing them too hard, not giving the gunner time to re-aim. Suddenly, a storm began to brew. Dark clouds rolled in, and a sudden sharp rain started to fall. The targets became harder to see. The wind started to gust, and the computer systems of the Abrams tanks struggled to adjust. Mason's gunner started missing. One miss, then another. Mason screamed into the comms. "Hold your fire! Hold your fire!" he yelled, but it was too late. He had already lost precious time and points. Then, the unthinkable happened. The Abrams tank shuddered to a stop. A plume of smoke rose from the engine compartment. Something was wrong. The engine had stalled. Mason's crew was stranded in the middle of the course, a sitting duck. The crowd hushed. The TV cameras turned their attention to the stalled tank. Mason's face, visible through the commander's hatch, was a mask of furious frustration. Just then, General Roberts, who had been watching with a grim look on his face, looked over at the old dusty Pershing in the garage. He had heard about it, a local legend about a museum piece. He turned to an aide. "Get that old tank ready to fire," he ordered. "I want to see what that thing can do." "Just for show." The aide looked confused. "General, that's not a live weapon. It's just for show. I want to see if the old warhorse still has some fight in it," the general said, his eyes on the stranded Abrams. He then looked around, his eyes searching for someone. He spotted Anya. "Sergeant Vance! You're on logistics, right? Get in that old thing! Let's see what you can do." Anya, her heart in her throat, knew this was her only chance. It wasn't the way she had planned, but it was the only way. She ran to the garage. Major Turner was already there, his hand on the tank. "Show them, kid," he said with a wink. "Show them what that old gun can do." Anya climbed into the driver's seat. The tank smelled of age and oil, but it felt right. She started the old engine, which grumbled to life with a deep roar. She drove it out of the garage, the crowd watching in silence. Her task was simple: fire at the targets that Mason's team had missed. But she had a better plan. She wasn't just going to hit the targets. She was going to show them a new way. The old Pershing tank rumbled onto the field, its tracks leaving deep marks in the wet earth. The crowd murmured in disbelief. A museum piece? Competing with a modern Abrams. Mason, still in his stalled tank, watched with a mixture of anger and confusion. He saw Anya's face in the driver's hatch, and he saw his own failure. He had mocked her, and now she was here, in a tank older than his grandfather, about to do what his crew couldn't. Anya took a deep breath. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She was thinking about precision. She drove the tank to the first position. She used the old mechanical sight, a heavy metal thing that didn't have a computer to help. She calculated the wind herself, remembered the charts Major Turner had given her. She aimed, she fired. The 90mm gun's report was sharp and clean, not the earth-shaking blast of the Abrams. The round flew true, hitting the target right in the center. A puff of smoke erupted, a perfect hit. The crowd gasped. She moved the tank to the next position. Another shot, another perfect hit. She was a ghost from the past, showing a new generation what true skill looked like. She wasn't fast. She was slow, careful, and deadly accurate. She was the opposite of everything Mason's crew believed in. She was the Pershing's gun. As she aimed for the last target, she heard a voice over the radio. It was Mason, his voice weak. "We've got an engine fire, Vance. The fuel line is leaking." Anya's heart skipped a beat. She looked over. She saw a small wisp of smoke coming from Mason's tank. It was a real danger. The heat of the engine could ignite the fuel, and it would be a disaster. Mason was panicked. His crew was bailing out. He was yelling for help. Anya had a choice. She could hit the last target, win the crowd's admiration, and leave Mason to his fate. Or she could do what she had been trained to do: help. She turned the Pershing, her old gun pointed not at a target, but toward Mason's tank. She drove toward him, her crewmates watching in confusion. "What are you doing, Vance?" The radio crackled. "I'm coming to help," she said, her voice calm and strong. She stopped her tank a safe distance away. From her tank, she directed Mason on how to use his fire extinguisher. She walked him through the steps calmly, clearly, her voice a soothing anchor in his panic. "You've got this, Lieutenant," she said. Just like we practiced, Mason, his face now a mix of shame and fear, did what she said. The fire was put out. He had been saved by the very person he had blamed for his failure. He was sitting in the middle of a field, humiliated, and saved by her. The crowd was silent. General Roberts walked over, his face unreadable. He looked at Mason, then at Anya. "Sergeant Vance," he said, his voice loud. "Why did you do that?" Anya looked him in the eye. "Sir, Mason and I may not be on the same crew, but we're on the same team. My job isn't just to hit targets. It's to keep our men safe." Then Mason, his voice raw, spoke up. "General, I lied. Vance didn't sabotage our tank. I made a mistake. My gunner rushed the shot. She told us this would happen. She told us, and we didn't listen." "She was right," the crowd murmured. General Roberts just nodded. The truth had been revealed, not by a document, but by a simple act of courage. The next day, there was no trophy for Mason's crew. Instead, there was a new order. Sergeant Anya Vance was promoted. She wasn't a little sparrow anymore. She was a leader. She had changed everything for the Tigers, not by destroying them, but by saving them. She had proved that a clever mind and a strong heart were more powerful than a loud roar.